energy mix is changing, and I think we need to change with the times.
There is going to be an extremely large need for renewables, whether that is wind or that is solar.
Our energy uses are not declining, but we know they're changing. First and foremost, the county needs to ask itself, do you want a wind energy or solar energy or any type of renewable energy project in your community?
As we phase away from fossil fuels, which I tend to believe is happening and going to happen even more, the key to all this for farmers, it's an additional revenue source that is direly needed by agriculture at this time when we have such depressed commodity prices.
A lot of these projects are new to some of our communities, especially to the rural communities, and these types of projects may be the largest economic development project these communities will ever see.
Anywhere from $20 million, $50 million, actually $100 million solar farms being talked about. And so how they are assessed, and that actually means more net revenue for county government, more assessed valuation. Being a profitable enterprise for a farmer is a good thing, I believe, and good for the community.
Now we see utility companies all of a sudden saying, wait a minute, we need to take a look at the long-term future. What can we do to support all types of energy production? We need a mix of all types. The fact that utilities are opening their eyes to alternatives is good, and that in turn will help long-term for the residents, for our utility rates, and our utility sources. I had just recently started as the White County Economic Development Director the beginning of 2006, and just a few short months later is when we had 3 different wind farm companies come into the community and say, we want to develop wind farms in White County. Honestly, we thought it was a joke at that time. Benton County was starting those conversations, so it's like, well, wait a minute. There is potential here. We really went from the beginning to the end, and we talked with a lot of people, not only here in Indiana, but nationwide. At that time, White County did have area plan and local zoning, but we did not have a zoning ordinance specific to wind energy. Is the setback proper? Is there a better way that we can do this? That helped not only the landowners, but also the developer to understand what they needed to do to make the project work in that community.
In this instance, and in agriculture zoning in particular, whether that's even livestock farms, I think I've witnessed it behooves agriculture as a whole that we have well-constructed zoning ordinances that really put some teeth in to not only protect those folks that participate or may have a project developed on their farm, but also for their neighbors. And if we can make these projects win-win for the community, for the neighbors, for the county, and the farmers themselves, and I would even say for the providers, whether that's the solar companies or the wind companies, adequately well thought through zoning is a benefit to everyone to do that.
So we spent a lot of time, myself and the Purdue Extension agent, working with the local government to help them understand, first of all, what is a commercial wind farm? I think a lot of the success of that project was due to the local government officials being heavily involved.
I think it's important that we set down some broad guidelines to get it established in a way that many can live with and adopt.
I must give credit to the White County officials because they took the time to listen to the landowners. Once they had a base zoning ordinance for wind energy, They sat down with a whole group of landowners. I mean, we're talking probably 100 or so, and went through that ordinance line by line and listened to what the landowners and the farmers were telling them. What should the setbacks be? What really happens throughout the whole process? I saw the difference it could make in a rural community that was challenged to make ends meet for the services that they need to provide to their residents.
Those ordinances need to be presented. They'll go through an approval process by county council and the county commissioners, besides initially the approval of the area plan commission. Counties that are considering solar in this instance, any experience you can get from someone who's been through the process will be very beneficial. We're involved with a solar project here in Knox County, which Vincennes is our county seat. For those not familiar with Knox County, we have 2 solar companies that are interested in building some very large actual solar projects. One of the projects that will be sited on reclaimed coal mine land is moving forward a little bit quicker than the one that will be on tillable farmland. The county council and the county commissioners, the area plan commission, thought it would be useful that we have some ordinances to regulate any solar farm activity in our county.
And then we moved into the discussions of the zoning ordinance and the economic development agreements.
Give a heads up to anyone, it's a lengthier process.
And really helping to figure out what was needed and what they needed to do to really make it work for their community.
The farmer retains the farm. They're not so far, they've all been leased acres. The solar companies want to lease the acres for a certain period of time, whether that's 20 or 30 years. And the technology may all change. Much of this is dependent on developing batteries. Solar is a great energy source during the day, but we also have people get home from work in the evening hours, and so we have to find some way to get a storage battery of some kind or a storage device that are all being worked on around the world, literally, to make solar an effective source to do that. Much similar to the wind turbines. Well, on days when the wind doesn't blow, you need a place to store that energy and to mediate the load, the peaks and the valleys in the electricity market that occur throughout a 24-hour time frame. We are talking about abatements. The county would extend to one of the solar companies if it's not all abated for too long a period of time. I think one of the suggestions I made was that the minimum would not be abated more than what the farmers were paying property taxes already. So whatever number that is, say it's X, or the solar company would at least in the initial years of construction and startup wouldn't be abated more than what they were going already. So the county would not lose any revenue. I think that's in today's time. I think county's government is always looking for more revenue, and I know the state as well will probably have budget cuts as fossil fuels get phased out. Some in our discussions at Purdue, that some would portend that up to 10 to 15% of farmland in the Midwest could potentially be covered with solar panels, which seems to me like a high number, but it surely will be some number of significance. So I think the heads up for legislators is, what's your plan? What are you going to do to keep Indiana competitive, to keep those manufacturing jobs here, and how can we do it in a way that we can all move forward together.
There's a lot of voices out there right now that are speaking on behalf of the whole state. We need to kind of weed through that information and determine what is best so our legislators can really determine what types of policies need to be set that will help carry us into the future.
In my experience with legislators, whether that's national, state, or local level, education is best when it's taking place ahead of time before the crisis takes place. Folks may not be as patient or in the listening mode as if they might be now before that happens. So getting ahead of the curve, I think, is critical. Field trips out to an existing wind farm today, I think those movers and shakers in state and counties need to make those visits, and as the number of solar fields increases, those opportunities, I think, for legislators to go out and visit and learn ahead of time is very, very critical. Legislators and elected officials, I have found, really want to make the right decision. It's knowing what the right decision is the challenge. So I'm a true believer in education to make that happen. And I know Purdue, the College of Agriculture, the School of Chemical Engineering, which is who I'm actually helping with on the project at the agronomy farm, has all kinds of information available of where the industry is today and maybe where it's headed. So I think it behooves county governments and farmers themselves to get educated on this issue. As always, it's better to do that up front instead of right when it presents itself. So you have a little bit of education involved, not only by government officials or by farmers themselves, but I think it's important to educate neighbors, folks that have some resistance if they're a neighbor to wind or solar.
Talk with the locals, understand what's happening, find out what is needed on the local side. And by local, in this case, I mean statewide. What happens in one community isn't an end-all be-all for the whole state.
There is a lot to learn. I think that industry is evolving quickly as new solar technology gets introduced almost yearly that is better and more efficient and produces more electricity.
Just ask the question and make sure you get all the facts before you make any decision. No decision should be made without fully educating themselves on every little detail to understand the project, how they work not only today during the development, but long term for the operation of the project. And then what happens after the project is no longer useful.
Well, I think any time the farmers profit, have a good economic year, it's good for rural communities. And I think that is very, very critical in the revenue projections from these solar leases tend to be somewhat profitable, I believe, to farmers, or they wouldn't be doing them. They make a forecast of what kind of revenue that lease needs to generate to replace the crop revenue from that. And so Indiana has more auto workers in Indiana than they do in Detroit and Michigan. A lot of people don't know that, but we have a big car and truck part manufacturing business here, although we do actually make cars in Lafayette and Princeton and Greensburg and Fort Wayne, companies scattered all around. But that was all in Indiana because we had the cheapest, I know, in the bottom 10% of electricity costs in the United States. In general, our coal-generated electricity is very cost competitive. So my wake-up call for legislators, and it is predicted that we will probably be somewhere over the top 50% now in electricity cost as we go away from coal, because I think we become more conscious of our environment, how we're going to preserve this planet in a good way. Well, I think renewables are a way that of the future that's gaining speed.
First and foremost, it's education.
In my career, I've visited many turbine farms, not much disturbance, and for a legislator or an elected official, get educated now. So what plans do they have to replace coal energy sources, which is very, very cheap, potential loss of jobs as companies may move their present plants or will not expand in Indiana. I had a great discussion with a company, an ag company, a processor in northwestern Indiana that had plans to expand their milling capacity for corn. And now they are having second thoughts because they are one of the largest electricity users to run those gigantic mills that they have. I've been a long time proponent of right to farm, rules, laws, and regulations that really farmers were there first, and they have been maintaining, sustaining, and actually improving their farms through most of their careers. And so it is their land, and so they should maintain most of the rights, I would say, to be able to control that as long as it doesn't infringe on others.
What's the best way for a local elected official or a local council member or volunteer to educate themselves?
Definitely talking with the developer. Do some research of your own. Make sure it's valid research. They're not all from credible sources. The National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado is a great resource on renewable energy. We have other universities right here in Indiana, Purdue University, IU, Ball State. Ivy Tech Community College is another great resource. They all have resources available that can help.
At Purdue, I think we're known to be energy, being land grant college here in the state that have resources available that could get elected officials exposed to current projects that are going on.
And ask organizations, because they have some of the connections out there.
Look at the economic numbers, what it really means for our state, and do that here in the off season. I know they're extremely, extremely busy when the session is going on. A new world we're all going through together, and we need as much information as we possibly can to make the best decision we can with what we know today. And not only for county government, but I think it's important for farmers themselves that may be approached and want to have a solar facility built on their farm.
It's been a couple of years since that project went live. What are the benefits that White County has seen from the wind farm coming in?
And so I know they've spent some of those dollars to help the schools with technology. And probably one of the most recent benefits was the Indiana Beach Family Amusement Park in White County. It had actually announced that it was closing its doors early this year. The county was able to use the Economic Development Wind Farm funds to help entice a new buyer. The Indiana Beach Amusement Park opened up this summer, and that was because of the funds that the county was able to put forth through the Economic Development Wind Farm. That's a benefit that's going to carry on for years and years for this community.
Fossil fuels are on the way out.
All of this really ties into rural economic development. That's my passion, along with the renewable energy, really helping rural communities look at new opportunities.